You know that feeling, right? It's the hottest day of the year, just sweltering, and that's when your AC decides to give up. It feels like the worst luck ever, but it's not. There's a real reason for it. So today, we're going to dive into exactly why our home's heating and cooling systems are so vulnerable to extreme weather, and more importantly, what we can do about it.
So let's talk about a number, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, wow, that isn't just hot, that's the absolute breaking point for your HVAC system. And we're not talking about some freak heat wave. In places like Perris, California, an inland valley town, they hit this mark all the time, from June all the way through September. It's their normal summer, and it's pushing those mechanical systems to the absolute edge.
And really, that gets to the heart of it all. It's not just the heat itself, it's the geography. See, if you live in one of these inland valleys, your HVAC is fighting this relentless battle. It's dealing with constant, dry desert heat and these wild temperature swings day in and day out. Your cousin living on the coast? Their system will never know that kind of stress. So the big takeaway here is that your location, it's kind of the hidden villain in the story of your home's comfort.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the hidden toll the climate takes, then get into the warning signs you got to watch for. After that, we'll look at the common culprits behind failures, tackle that big repair or replace question, and finally, wrap up with how to be a smarter system owner. Let's get into it. Okay, first up, the climate's hidden toll. Think about it. This is the relentless day-in, day-out grind. It's the kind of strain that extreme environments put on literally every single part of your heating and cooling system.
And the difference this makes is, well, it's huge. Look at this. A system in a nice, mild coastal climate, it might last you a solid 15, maybe even 20 years. But you put that same system in an extreme inland climate, and you're lucky to get half that. We're talking 8 to 10 years tops. That constant stress literally just wears everything out twice as fast. It's pretty staggering when you see it laid out like that.
So, the big question is, how do you know if your system is getting close to that finish line? Well, that's where the warning signs come in. The good news is, most systems don't just suddenly die on you. They give you clues. Think of them as little cries for help, long before things go completely sideways. Okay, let's see if any of these ring a bell. You hearing weird sounds like clicking, buzzing, maybe even grinding? Or how about your energy bills? Have they suddenly just spiked for no reason? Maybe you've noticed warm air blowing out of the vents when the AC is supposed to be on full blast. Or, and this one's a classic, the system just runs constantly but the house never actually gets cool. Oh, and if you see ice forming on the refrigerant lines outside, that is a major red flag. Seriously, these aren't just little annoyances. This is your system screaming that something is really, really wrong.
All right, so you've spotted some of the warning signs, but what's actually going on under the hood? Let's pop it open and diagnose the common culprits. Because even though the symptoms might be different, the root causes in these tough climates usually boil down to one of just a few usual suspects.
So culprit number one is often the capacitor. The easiest way to think of it is like a little battery. It gives that big jolt of power to get the main motors started. And guess what its number one enemy is? Yep, relentless heat. It just cooks the stuff inside until the capacitor starts to bulge, leak, and then poof, it's done. If your outside unit is just humming but never kicks on, chances are this little guy is to blame.
Next up, we've got refrigerant leaks. Picture this. Every single day, the metal lines in your system are expanding in the heat and then shrinking back down as it cools off at night. All that flexing back and forth creates tiny little cracks, especially at the joints, and that's where the refrigerant escapes. When you're low on refrigerant, you're low on cooling power. And if it gets too low, well, you could end up starving the compressor for oil, and that can completely destroy it.
And that brings us to the big one, compressor failure. The compressor is literally the heart of your entire system. It's the workhorse that pumps the refrigerant through the lines. Now imagine being forced to run for 12, even 16 hours a day in that extreme heat. It's basically a death sentence for a piece of machinery. It just wears out all the bearings and motors inside. This is almost always the most expensive repair, and honestly, it's often the one that means it's game over for your AC.
Which leads us perfectly into this next part, repair or replace. This is the big decision, isn't it? Every single homeowner is going to face this at some point. It's a tough call, financially and practically. When do you finally stop trying to patch up an old, failing system?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? You don't want to just throw good money after bad on endless repairs. But at the same time, you don't want to shell out for a whole new system if all it needed was a simple, cheap fix. So how do you make that call without just, guessing?
Well, here's a really handy rule of thumb you can use. It's called the $5,000 rule. It's super simple. You just take the age of your system in years and multiply it by the cost of the repair you're looking at. If that final number is more than $5,000, replacement is probably the smarter financial choice. So, for example, let's say your system is 12 years old and needs a $500 repair. 12 times 500 is $6,000. That's over the line, which is a pretty strong signal that it's time to start looking at a new, more reliable system.
Okay, let's wrap this up by flipping the script. We're going to go from being reactive, just fixing things when they break, to being proactive. This is all about smarter system ownership. The whole idea is to help you take control, to get more life out of your system, and to know exactly what you should expect when you do have to call in a pro.
So no matter what you're calling a pro for, a repair, a simple tune-up, there are a few things you should always expect. First, good communication. They should give you a clear arrival window and keep you updated. Second, they need to do a thorough diagnosis and give you a written quote before they do any work. No surprises. And finally, after they're done, they should test the whole system to make sure everything is running exactly the way it should. So after all this, what's the single best thing you can do to extend your system's life? It's actually really simple. Get it professionally maintained twice a year. You do one in the spring before summer hits and another in the fall before you need the heat. This is how a pro can spot worn-out parts and tiny issues before they turn into those massive, expensive, middle-of-a-heat wave disasters.
And that really just leaves us with one last thought to chew on. Your HVAC system works so hard, day in and day out, protecting you and your family from the elements. It's kind of the unsung hero of your house, right? So the real question is, are you doing enough to protect it?